Sega!
Sonic TV.
Hey there guys, I'm SonicGhost and welcome to a bonus episode of Let's Play Sonic Adventure. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at all the DLC that Sega released for Sonic Adventure back on the Dreamcast. Now the Dreamcast was actually ahead of its time. You were actually able to connect the system online using the broadband adapter for the system. So, because of that, Sonic Adventure got a decent amount of DLC back in the day, which was Dreamcast exclusive. Sega never actually brought this stuff over to the many re-releases of Sonic Adventure like on the GameCube, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC. So today we're going to be taking a look at basically all the DLC that Sega released for the game, starting off with the celebration of the Dreamcast's launch. We're taking a look at the Dreamcast launch party, specifically the one that they released for the North American Dreamcast. So they did do a launch party piece of DLC for Sonic Adventure for all three territories. There's a US version, a European version, and a Japanese version. And they all basically do play out the same. In fact, the only real difference is really just the Dreamcast logo. But that's about it. Everything else is basically the same. Even some of the dates are very similar. So they all released the same year, but they did release at slightly different times. But the one that's most famous is the Dreamcast launch here in North America, because that released on 9/9/99, so it's a very symmetrical date. So back in the day, you would be able to hook up your Dreamcast online and download content to the system itself. Unfortunately, nowadays you can't really download this data to a Dreamcast. The only way you're really going to be able to do something like this nowadays is if you're playing on a modified Dreamcast and just install the data yourself to the system's VMU, which was its virtual memory card unit. So we're pretty much going to be just taking a look at all the DLC for Sonic Adventure through the PC version of the game. Luckily, the modding community has stepped in and they did a very good job converting all this DLC from the Dreamcast version onto the PC version of the game. So because of that, we're playing in widescreen, so the game does look a little bit better in widescreen. Doesn't really fix a lot of other issues in the game's graphics, to be honest, because there are certain cutscenes that don't work in widescreen and some characters just kind of clip out of bounds in widescreen. It's a little weird. As you can see here, these are all the different logos for all the different versions of the Dreamcast launch party DLC, so really there isn't too much different here. It's just that, you know, for a territory difference, this is really the only thing to note. Alright, so now our next piece of DLC is going to be some challenges. First off, we're going to be taking a look at the AT&T events for Sonic Adventure. So Sega partnered with AT&T and they released 3 specific events. And 2 of them are time trials you have to go into levels for. The first one here is Speed Highway. You play as Sonic and you just play through this level pretty much as fast as possible. You're only really doing the beginning section here of Speed Highway. You're not doing parts 2 and 3. So we're really just playing until we get to the rocket at the end of the first section of Speed Highway, transitioning into the buildings section where you just run down this long building. That's where it ends. So as you can see, going throughout the level, we have AT&T signs just plastered everywhere. And there's also special platforms that was made as well for this piece of DLC that doesn't show up anywhere else in the game. These AT&T platforms only really show up here when you're playing with this DLC on. And it's pretty interesting, to be honest. I wasn't expecting Sonic to partner with a cell phone company back in the day, but hey, you learn something new every day, and there's just a lot of interesting things with this DLC in general. The fact that the Dreamcast was able to do this back in the day, it's just very surprising, because as we said earlier in the video, Sega was ahead of its time doing DLC for a system like this back in 1999. Because nowadays, downloadable content is a standard for all game consoles. Every single person nowadays uses downloadable content in some fashion. So to see Sega doing this years ago, before any system was really able to properly connect online, it's just impressive. But that was Act 1, that's cleared, so at this point now, we are sent back to Station Square, and in order to end the challenge, we have to jump through the goal sign here. To start the challenge, we had to jump through a start sign, and to end, we gotta jump through a goal sign. So now we completed it, we have our time, and we can go ahead and submit this to the leaderboards back in the day if you're actually playing this on your Dreamcast. But because we're playing the PC version, there really aren't any leaderboards for this, so yeah, we're not going to be submitting that time. If you can go ahead and beat that, then go ahead and post a comment in the video below. But now our second challenge here is with Knuckles. So, as Knuckles here, we're just gonna find 4 different treasures here, and it's kind of annoying to be honest because there's no real area that you can check to tell you, hey, there's a treasure right here. You just have to constantly dig in this area and then hope you get lucky. Although this challenge does kind of help you see where a lot of the hidden rings are in the Mystic Ruins with Knuckles, because there's a lot of hidden ring areas here with Knuckles. But you just have to find 4 of these little treasures, and 2 of them are in kind of easy to see locations, as you can see. One's just in front of a minecart, the other one's in front of Windy Valley's entrance, so those ones are a little bit easier to find. The first 2, however, are just kind of a crapshoot. So once we find all 4 of the challenges, now we have to go back to the very beginning where we started the challenge and jump through the goal sign. Jumping through the goal sign, we go ahead and get our clear time here. So beat this in under a minute. Pretty good time. Once again, you could have submitted this back to the leaderboards back in the day in your Dreamcast, but there is no leaderboard for this, so we're going to move on to the third and final event. Now is Tails. So as soon as you load in the station square, you'll go ahead and see these signs plastered here saying that, hey, there's a time trial for you to do in Sand Hill. So we're making our way to the Mystic Ruins here, and now we're going to go ahead and play Sand Hill. So as soon as you jump in, there's a gigantic start screen. They really want to make sure you hit the start banner in this one. So this challenge, you have to go ahead and go through 10 different AT&T gates here. And it's kind of weird, honestly, to do this challenge. You probably have to do this one a couple times just to learn the route. Simply just because these things are spread all over the place, to be honest. So it took me a couple tries to figure out where I'm going, but once you get an idea, then I just say go ahead and restart the level and just hit every single gate. There's only 10 of these gates in the level, so you can't miss a single one if you're doing this challenge. But luckily our last 2 are pretty much in a pretty linear set here. So we're going to go ahead and hit our 10th gate, and then all we got to do now is cross over to the goal, which conveniently is also the very end of the level. So once I hit the goal, then we also end the level. So we beat that in 52 seconds and 90 milliseconds, which is pretty good. Again, you could have submitted that score back in the day, but there is no leaderboard, so I'm not going to be submitting that. So now it's time for another piece of DLC. This piece of DLC is the Reebok DMX Challenge. Are you feeling it? I sure am. This is actually the first time that Sonic did actually pair up with another company for a shoe advertisement, Reebok. Everyone thought that Soap Shoes was the first time Sonic partnered with a different company. Nah, Reebok was it. So back in the day, you could download the Reebok Challenge here. And in order to activate this one, you need to jump through a start sign going into Emerald Coast. And then once you enter the level, there are 5 hidden shoes for you to find in the level. So we're going to be finding all 5 of these shoes, and that'll be the challenge. Just like with the Speed Highway Challenge, you're only playing through the first act of this, so we're playing up to where the lighthouse is. Then after that, the area just abruptly ends. So once you find all 5 shoes and cross the goal, then you have to quit the level if you want to go and do something else. I should mention that at the end of all these challenges, you can go ahead and restart these by just leaving the level and jumping through the start banner once again to reactivate the challenge and play it all over again. So that's our 4th pair of the Reebok shoes. Only 1 more to find, and then that'll be it. I did notice one weird thing when playing through this. I don't know if it's the DLC itself, or if it's just the mod I used for the PC version of Sonic Adventure. But once I hit 1 checkpoint a level when doing one of these challenges, every single checkpoint was activated. So I don't know if that was a weird quirk with the mod or the DLC itself, but that does kind of help, because if you do get stuck, all you gotta do is hit restart when you pause the game, and then you'll be sent back pretty much to near the beginning of the level, because the first checkpoint you do hit in Emerald Coast, that's pretty much in the beginning, so you can get most if not all the shoes that you did miss if you have to restart for whatever reason. But now it's time to take a look at yet another piece of challenge DLC here, the Samba Grand Prix event. So for this GP, we're actually heading over to Twinkle Park, and there's an exclusive circuit made for Twinkle Park here. So as you can see, it's not in the park itself, it's actually on the outside. So we head over to the gate, we'll go ahead and begin our race. And actually we do get to play some extra piece of music in the game too. The Dreamcast DLC did actually add in different music to the game, depending on what game it's referencing, because it won't really add in new music for the most part. There is one piece of DLC that will actually add in new music that's not Sonic or Sega themed, but for the most part you're going to be hearing music that is from other Sega games. So this one here in particular, we're hearing background music from Sonic R, in particular from the Sega Saturn. This is the instrumental version of Super Sonic Racing, and it's really fitting honestly for a racetrack like this. I do like the song a lot. I do like the lyrics version a little bit more, but the instrumental is also really good too. So this track is kind of difficult at times, if you want to be honest, because there's a lot of sharp turns here, and the one I really do not like is the first sharp turn when you leave the starting gate, because you gotta make a hard right. And I swear, half the time, that is not an easy turn to make. I let go of the gas, I slow down before I get to it, and I still slam into the wall. So this one can take a little bit of practice if you want a good time, but the biggest thing I can recommend for this is use your brakes, let go of the acceleration, and that should make turning a little bit easier here. It's got one more lap to go, and then we'll go ahead and clear this piece of DLC as well. I do like how they do change the music for some of these pieces of DLC. That was a nice touch. The VMUs weren't that big back in the day, but they were bigger than, say, like a Nintendo 64 memory card. So actually being able to add in the music from other games, that was really only possible because of the VMUs. That's where all the DLC data was stored back in the days, in those memory cards. Back in the day, you'd be able to download this data onto your Dreamcast itself, and it would just play with your Sonic Adventure disc, but the Dreamcast had no internal storage of its own. We didn't really start seeing consoles do this until the original Xbox back in 2001. But that was the Samba Grand Prix, so that's that piece of DLC, so let's go ahead and hit quit and take a look at our next piece of DLC. So our next piece of DLC here is a little bit weird to describe for anyone outside of Japan. This one is Sonic-kun's Hide and Seek. So this one is based off of a Famitsu magazine. I do believe I said that name right. It is Japanese, so I do apologize if I mispronounced some stuff here for this DLC, since some of it is just translated directly from Japanese. But this piece of DLC is based off of a Japanese magazine that all throughout Station Square, there are 5 hidden hedgehog photos that we need to go ahead and find. So, you have a 10-minute time limit to find all these hedgehog photos, but once you do, then you want to go ahead and just collect all these and you can submit your high score to the leaderboards back in the day, just like a lot of the other time challenges we did earlier on. So, this one's very interesting, and again, this is really only something you understood back if you were following this magazine, if you lived in Japan, because I do not believe we got this piece of DLC here in North America. And in fact, that's another reason why I'm playing the mod version of all these DLCs on the PC version in particular of Sonic Adventure. The modding community has been able to add basically every single piece of DLC back in the Sonic Adventure except one. There was one piece of DLC that was unfortunately lost to time, and it was a piece of New Year's DLC. So unfortunately that piece of DLC was never properly backed up back in the day, so we weren't able to really preserve it, which honestly you weren't really missing too much honestly from that. So that piece of DLC celebrated the Kanamasu New Year celebration. So basically to be a whole bunch of Kanamasu decorations all over Station Square just to celebrate New Year's Eve. And unfortunately that was lost to time, so that's one of those things I can't show off, but we can show basically everything else. But now it's time for us to move on to our next piece of DLC here, the QO Challenge. So this one has us collecting a whole bunch of QO cards all over Station Square and the Mystic Ruins. So this one, once again, was one of those Japanese only pieces of DLC that we never really got here for an obvious reason. This is based off something in Japan. So you're going to be finding 3 cards here in Station Square and then 3 more in the Mystic Ruins. So there's a lot of these we need to go ahead and find here spread out, but luckily they're all kind of in the same general area, Station Square. They're all on the same map, but they are pretty well hidden. One on top of a building, one in the little sewer area, but then this one in particular the one hidden with other pictures on the wall. This is probably the hardest one to find in Station Square. It's just so well hidden. In fact, I think that's the hardest one to find, period. It just blends in really well to its surrounding. But that's it for Station Square. Now it's time for us to go to the Mystic Ruins and find 3 more cards there. So as soon as we get off the train, we want to go ahead and make our way over to the train tracks, because over at the very end of the train tracks is another card for us to collect. So we're going to grab that, and then jump down here at the very bottom where Tails' house is located. And yet another card is here on the ledge. I like this card too. It says you might break a nail if you fall from here. Although you can tell that was kind of a rough translation, because it said if you fell from here. So there can be some grammatical errors, unfortunately, with these rough translations. And there's nothing really you can do about that if you just translate directly from Japanese to English. You have to change the wording around if you don't want some weird languages like that just to kind of slip through. You don't want to have bad grammatical errors. That's kind of why it takes a while for things to localize here. It's simply just because of all the dang translation that needs to be done. You can't just translate words from one language to another. Sometimes you have to change things around. Speaking of change things around, it's time to take a look at the Halloween DLC here in Sonic Adventure. This only affected Twinkle Park, but man, did it really change up Twinkle Park. Throughout the level, you'll see a whole bunch of jack-o'-lanterns here just kind of floating around. And the level's colors were also changed to match Halloween, so there's a lot of black and orange this time around. And there's a lot of trick-or-treat just splatter all over the walls. This looks really cool, and this is one of those things I kind of wish we actually got in the modern releases of Sonic Adventure, to be honest. This is just really aesthetically, it just looks really nice. And it's sad to see that Sega never really decided to re-release any of this DLC when they re-released this game on the PS3, Xbox 360, and Steam, because they could have easily put DLC in those versions of the game, since back then, those consoles were easily able to do downloadable content. In fact, the PS3 and 360 in particular were the first real systems to push downloadable content in most of their games, so Sega could have easily done that with this, and in fact, they did make DLC for Sonic Adventure. And it was the DX expansion, meaning that you got all the GameCube improvements if you bought it separately from Sonic Adventure. So they did do DLC, it's just that the DLC was such a minute thing that might as well just been included in the base version, to be honest. It was for GameCube back in the day, but they made it a separate thing when they ported the game over to the 7th generation of systems. But we're nearing the end of the level here, so as you can see, once again, this level looks really nice with all the Halloween decorations all over the place, trick-or-treat all over the walls and the floor, the jack-o'-lanterns everywhere. It does look really cool, and I do wish we would have got this in modern releases of Sonic Adventure, but luckily the modding community has stepped up, and they ported all the stuff to the PC version of Sonic Adventure. Nowadays, I recommend people, if they're going to play Sonic Adventure, to play the PC version and use mods. Years ago, I wouldn't have said this because the PC version is a port of a port of a port, meaning that there was a lot of stuff lost in translation and it was pretty buggy. But once the modding scene started to get their hands on this game, they fixed a lot of things, they added a whole bunch of stuff, and now it's probably the best way to play Sonic Adventure.
Yes. Yeah, not bad.
Now that we're done looking at the Halloween DLC, it's time to move on to Christmas. And there's actually 2 pieces of Christmas DLCs for us to look at in Sonic Adventure. This first one is for Christmas of 1998. So this one has a couple of Christmas trees just laid out throughout Station Square. They're kind of small trees as you can see, but whenever you run up and touch one of the Christmas trees, not only do you get a special message, but you also get extra music playing too. So we got some Christmas music in this game. This would have been nice to see around Christmas time for Sonic Adventure. Sadly, once again, Sega never really decided to bring this over outside the Dreamcast, so having the mods just re-implement this back into the PC version in particular, it just helps spice things up a bit here and gives you more of your holiday spirit if you're playing this game around Christmas time. But be careful not to eat too much cake. Too much cake is a bad thing. So bad that car wanted to run me over. You gotta love just trying to run down the Station Square roads and then just cars appear out of nowhere.
The train headed for the Mystic Ruins.
So here in the train lobby, you get some more trees here behind the little pillars. Although trying to jump around where these trees are is kind of a pain because, as you can see, when Sonic is standing on one of the trees, he kind of goes crazy. The hitbox on these trees are a little wonky if you want to be honest, so Sonic tries to stand on one of the trees and he just slides right off to the side. And that's the only problem, but luckily that's the only two set of trees you do have to jump towards if you want to activate the music. And as you can hear, the music does repeat. There's only really 3 songs linked to these trees, but they're spread out throughout Station Square, so you don't have to find one specific tree to find one specific song. You can find one tree and it could play the same thing as a tree on the other side of Station Square, so really it's not too big of a deal. You don't want to fully explore the area. You can just find the one you want and just let that music play, but it only plays when you're in Station Square. As soon as you go into a level or leave this hub to go to another hub, the music will stop, unfortunately. But that was Christmas of 1998. Now it's time to go ahead and advance 1 year and take a look at Christmas 99 DLC. So this DLC we actually got here in the States, and this piece of DLC, not only did the trees get bigger, but the songs got better in my opinion too. Because with this piece of DLC, we got Christmas Nights music. And if you've never played Christmas Nights, it's a treat. Luckily, Christmas Nights used to be an exclusive thing on the Sega Saturn, but with the new release of Nights into Dreams on the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and PC, there is a Christmas Nights mode in that re-release. And it doesn't have everything from the original Sega Saturn Christmas Nights, but it does have most of the content, including the music. And this music is so good from Christmas Nights. It's just very catchy, and some of my favorite holiday-themed music, too.
The train headed for the Mystic Ruins will be
As soon as you enter the train station here in Station Square, though, you just notice this tree right away. It blocks so much of this area. It is ridiculous. I'm surprised it even got the fit in this area. It just barely fits. But there's one more tree, and it's right down here next to the casino. You tap this tree, and we get some more Christmas Nights music, which is so good. I can't say that enough. I just really like the Christmas Nights score. It's just really good Christmas music. But there's one more piece of DLC for us to look at, and this is some New Year's DLC that we actually do have. This here is the Y2K DLC, celebrating Sonic in the year 2000. So this piece of DLC is definitely the most meaty out of all of them, because in every single action stage, there are a set of rings for you to find. And all they do when you find them is that they'll give you a special message, and they'll change the song to Palm Tree Panic from Sonic CD. So the rest of this video now, we're just going to be taking a look at this piece of DLC in particular, just because of how many rings there are in this piece of DLC to find. So I'm going to be showing off the location of every single ring. So I hope you like to listen to Palm Tree Panic, because that song plays every time you hit one of these rings, so we're going to be hearing that for the next 10 minutes. But that's basically all the DLC here in Sonic Adventure. They put so much into this game back in the day, and it's unfortunately just some of it was lost in time, like I mentioned earlier. That one piece of DLC celebrating New Year's was lost. We at least have one piece of DLC preserved that does celebrate New Year's with the Y2K DLC, but the other New Year's DLC, it's sad to see that just gone. So I hope one day maybe that could be recovered and just recreated somehow, just on the information that we do have about it. But what we were able to preserve, which is pretty much a good majority of it, you can play now in the PC version, or if you want to go ahead and just play this on your Dreamcast, people have been able to go ahead and preserve the VMU files as well. So if you have yourself a modified Dreamcast, you can go ahead and put this data onto your virtual memory unit for the Dreamcast, plug into your controller, and play this DLC on your Dreamcast. Again, I do recommend you have the PC version. Go ahead and download these mods in particular. If you just go ahead and download yourself Better SADX, then you're pretty much going to be getting all this stuff in that package. You're going to get the Dreamcast models along with the textures. You're going to get a lot of sound and bug fixes. And the DLC is even included in that mod pack now. So if you just download yourself the Better SADX mod in particular, you pretty much get the best experience nowadays for playing Sonic Adventure on your PC. This is a mod I will highly recommend, and I'm very happy to see that the modding community was able to add all this stuff back into the PC version of Sonic Adventure. Now there is one other thing I was originally planning to show in this video, but I honestly, when I was starting to work on this bonus video, I did not expect just how much content in general this DLC had. So I was originally planning to also show the beta Windy Valley, which was cut from this game. But unfortunately, I'll probably be covering that in a different video at some point, simply just because this already is a long enough video. If I added the beta Windy Valley into this, that could probably make this video near an hour long, and I don't want a video that long on my channel. So we're going to probably be taking a look at the Windy Valley beta in a different video later on, but the Windy Valley beta was yet another thing that was preserved as well. So the modding community was able to preserve not only all this DLC from the Dreamcast, but they were also able to fully complete that beta level that was cut from this game entirely and add it back into Sonic Adventure. Beta Windy Valley has also made a lot of other appearances in other Sonic games via mods too. Like I've seen Beta Windy Valley in like Sonic Generations and even Sonic Lost World. So it's very possible for that level just to appear in other games just because it's a pretty open-ended level, if you want to be honest, and it's really interesting to just take a look at how much that level has changed between its original conception with the beta and then the final products version. But unfortunately, like I said, that level will just make this video a little too long, so there'll be a separate video covering that later on. But for now, I'm very happy to at least be able to take a look at all this DLC in Sonic Adventure, just because of how much content that this DLC all has to offer. I mean, this one part of the DLC in general, just finding all these rings just to celebrate the new millennium. This right here took me over an hour of playing this game just to go around all the different levels and find all these rings. It's surprising of just how much attention to detail they put into this DLC in general. It's really insane just how much is it backed. I can't say that enough. And again, I do wish this was re-released, but if you have the PC version of Sonic Adventure or the original Dreamcast release, then there are ways for you to play this DLC via those methods. So that's pretty much all I have to say for this one, so the rest of this is just going to be watching a couple more rings just appear in these levels. After a while, you do get kind of sick of hearing the Palm Tree Panic music when you're going through these levels because it does loop a little bit quicker than some of the music in Sonic Adventure, but this is still a pretty good piece of music, and it's from the Japanese soundtrack of Sonic CD, not the American one. So because of that, we didn't get this DLC here in North America. This was Japanese. Kind of sad because since this is probably the most packed piece of DLC in Sonic Adventure, this would have been nice to get here in our version of the game as well, but we didn't have this song from Sonic CD, so that's one reason not to give it to us. That, and at the same time, the Dreamcast wasn't really doing that well for Sega outside of Japan. It was struggling here in North America, and it didn't really have that much time to really last in the market before the PS2 ate its lunch. So the Dreamcast only lasted a little over a year before Sega just basically had to stop making games for the system in general. So that's kind of sad, but to be fair, they didn't really stop with the Dreamcast in Japan because for years the Dreamcast was actually getting more games, and even to this day, people still make games for the Dreamcast. There is a loyal following for the system, and some people release their own games on the system nowadays. So to see the homebrew community still have a lot of support for the system and want to make new games for it, it's very impressive, I will say that. Because the Dreamcast was ahead of its time with having 480p output, so back then consoles were still for the most part only at 240p, so a lower resolution than this. And even if they could go higher, it was like 480i at the most, an interlaced format that back in the day worked out, but nowadays is not pretty to look at. So again, Sega was pretty ahead of its time, and this console even used a VGA connection, the same kind of cable that you would use to hook up a computer monitor. So that is insane. Sega was just that far ahead in their time. But unfortunately, all that advancements didn't really matter when the system itself didn't really sell all too well. And because of it, that was Sega's last console. After the Dreamcast, Sega just stopped making video game consoles altogether and just became a software developer, which is sad, but because of that, this is why Sega is still in the market today. If Sega was still making consoles today, I don't think they would be in the video game market anymore, to be honest. Because after the Dreamcast, they were just seeing how bad their sales were, and they couldn't compete like they were back in the Genesis days, so it's kind of hard nowadays to be a hardware manufacturer for that reason. That's why it's really only the big three companies that we have now, Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. Because anyone else trying to enter the ring, it's kind of hard to, just because it's really hard to compete with these other 3 major companies out there now. And yeah, it just kind of makes it challenging to stay afloat financially, which is very disappointing, but at the same time, it's just one of those things that just kind of happens, unfortunately. Man, what a weird tangent to go into for just collecting rings. Again, there's not very much to this DLC. You just go around collecting a whole bunch of rings in these levels, but there's so many. There's 35 rings total in the Y2K DLC, so there's a lot of areas for you to explore. I mean, every single character has their time to shine in this portion of the video because of it, because every single character has at least 1 ring to find in a level. So there is a lot for you to explore because of these rings, and some areas I actually didn't even know existed until I played this DLC. It's like, oh hey, I didn't know about this path. That's pretty interesting. So this also really does help you if you're just wanting to replay the game. Just play it with this piece of DLC on. Just try to find all these rings on your own, because some of these rings are really well hidden. This piece of DLC is really interesting and is an idea I would like to see more devs do in their games. Whether it be from some kind of update, extra mode in the game, or even just DLC like Sega decided to do with Sonic Adventure. I would like to see some kind of just random collectible like this that's not really required for anything, doesn't really do much of anything at all for the game, but it's just a cool way for you to explore more of these levels and even teach you new things about the game you didn't even know. This is a really cool idea. But with our final ring collected, that's the end of this piece of DLC and the end of all the DLC here in Sonic Adventure. There was a lot of content to look at, and at the end of the day, it's really an interesting look just to load up your Dreamcast or your PC copy of Sonic Adventure and play through all these pieces of DLC. So I highly recommend, if you have access to this DLC, just to go ahead and try it out. This will be a fun way to spend an afternoon. Thank you guys for watching the video, and I'll see you guys next time.